Okay, so I think I'm recording here. Yeah. All right. So to continue, as this shows up here, what we looked at last was how magic gets demonized. Now, another thing that goes on in this time period is we also have a major shift in religion. And generally, when you look at the history of religion, we find that religion can have a key focus point around one of three things. Religion is either nature focused, or God focused, or self focused. And that focus very much will characterize all the various features of that religion. So, for example, nature focused religion is what we find amongst indigenous people in pre literary societies, before there are written holy books, where the divine, that which is holy, the sacred, is seen as embedded and expressed in and through nature, not as something that transcends nature, is above this world, but is in nature. And so as a religion, it is so focused on connecting with the divine, God, so to speak, to use that word, in nature itself, right? So it's sort of a nature-focused based religion. And so it's all about being in harmony with nature, being respectful of the spirit of the trees, of the animals, of what have you, okay? And really being tuned in to that. And that's what we see in the very beginnings of religion. That's typical of shamanic cultures and indigenous people and pre-literary societies. Then, once we have the development of writing and the beginnings of civilization and whatnot, that's when we start to see the development of the different world religions taking place. And so you find then religions tend to kind of go in to other trajectories, where increasingly there becomes a focus on worshiping one God amongst many, that there is one supreme God, and it's about having a relationship with this God, worshiping God as creator, as source of all that is, obeying the laws of this God, and it becomes a God-focused religion. As a religion, it's all about your relationship with this God, honoring this God, obeying this God. Okay, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze here. And how do I pause? Okay, just hang. Okay, resume, continue to record. Oh, I thought I paused recording. I didn't. Oh, it's still recording. Okay, your screen sharing pause. Oh, my screen sharing pause. I wanted the recording to pause. So I'm recording. So I still want to see the screen. Oh, now how do your screen sharing is paused. I don't want that to be paused. Oh, yeah. Okay, I want to go back. How can I go back? I'm going forward. I want to go back. Okay, there. And I want to share the screen. And so I don't want that. I want it to resume share. Okay, well, I guess you heard me blow my nose. So to go back again to that previous slide, because I'm not finished yet. Why doesn't it go back? Oh, I'm going back too far back. I want to go forward. Oh, yay. Okay, there we go. Oh, just slow down. Oh, okay, there we go. All right, now, so we have God-focused religion. And this is what's typical then, of course, of the Jewish, Christian, Muslim traditions in the West. Also certain aspects of Hinduism, that's what's typical, okay? Such as, the Hare Krishnas, devotion to a particular deity is central here, right? It's a God-focused kind of religion. And then the third type of religious orientation we find is a self-focused religion, where the emphasis is on attaining enlightenment, the enlightened self, shifting your state of being to, realize your true nature is divine. Some form of self-enlightenment is the focus. And that is typical, say, of Buddhism, a lot of Hinduism. Again, Hinduism is very sectarian, but depending on the group, right? You'll find that in Hinduism. So you'll have that kind of a focus. And so what we're going to be seeing here in the West, we find this unfolding in the sense that we find these shifts taking place. Okay, so what we find, as I sort of mentioned, in pre-literate societies, it was a nature-based religion, focused on being in tune with nature, in harmony with nature. The shamans were the ones that were kind of the leaders in this. And then from there, as writing develops, then these figures become sort of prophetic figures. These revelations start to be put into books, holy books. They become the word of God in a holy book. And then, we get then the development of the Western traditions largely here, okay? Where we have a God-centered religion. And the emphasis is on the divine as being transcendent, above and beyond nature, yet also present everywhere, directing things, but yet fundamentally transcendent. Okay. Well, then others, for example, so some kind of taking on, we have the role of prophets. Then there were others who sort of become these magicians I was mentioning previously, that there are these people who display these superpowers. They can heal the sick and do miracles and command animals to go, dangerous animals to not do any harm, and have amazing powers. And so the question that raises is like, wow, how is it possible that humans can have these sort of superpowers? It's almost like they're godlike beings, right? And that raises the question, well, what is the nature of the self? How could it be possible for the human being to become these superpower beings of having magical powers? And so that then leads to a focus on trying to discover this godlike superpower within. And with that then is a journey of discovering the self as being divine, right? That God is not necessarily out there in the heavens somewhere, but God is actually in here, in me, in my essence. And I could activate that divine essence within me, activate those superpowers within me. And so this is what results in sort of a self-focused type of religion. And this is what we see happening here in the West, which is, okay, yeah. So this isn't the one that I had, is it? So we find a shift away in the Greco-Roman world, a shift away from nature-based focused religious traditions and orientations. Then we have the rise and again, ongoing development of a God-focused based religions like Judaism and Christianity at that point. However, we also find now here through these people discovering these internal superpowers, if you like, the rise of a self-focused type of spirituality. Okay, and a similar trend happens in India, all right, with the enlightened gurus going into the forest and discovering these abilities within themselves. And so then here in this camp, the religious goal and the focus is to come to know your true self, know who you really are, to attain some form of self-awakening, enlightenment, self-realization, and fundamentally to realize that the essential self is divine. And this is what takes place in the Greco-Roman world. And this is what leads to the rise of what's known as Gnosticism. Okay, let me just move this. Hopefully this works, that I can move it down there so you can read that little box there. So what is Gnosticism? Well, the root meaning of gnosis, or not being Gnostic, gnosis is the key word here, Gnosis, gnosis. That's where you get the word knowledge from. And it basically means to know. It's all about knowledge. Knowledge about what? To know one's true self. To know that the self is indeed divine. And the emphasis here is in the first century onward, first, second century, we get the development of various groups that become labeled as Gnostics. And these groups could be various kinds. They could be Christian Gnostics, Jewish Gnostics, pagan, i.e. still worshiping the Roman gods, Gnostics, various groups. Okay, there's a lot of diversity here. But their goal is one way or another, is that the way of salvation, the way of deliverance from the suffering and trials of this world and this realm of human existence, this material existence, that the path of salvation entails a form of enlightenment, knowledge. Knowledge is the way of salvation, not participation in a ritual, not simply believing something. Okay, I mean, there's a close line there to believe and to know, right? But knowledge is the key here. And so here in these groups, they emphasize that you need to know your true essential self as divine. All right. And again, to not have your sense of identity with this physical, material, empirical self, but to shift it to realize that there is within the self a divine component, essentially spiritual, and that is your true self. And to identify with that and to awaken to that self, that is the key to salvation. And so in these Gnostic circles, they basically had developed a paradigm that this physical material world is evil. It is a form of bondage. It's a disaster to be here in physicality. The physical is a barrier to the spiritual. And we need to, and it's like the body is a tomb that has captured the soul, that the soul is imprisoned in, and the soul needs to seek a release, freedom from this physical body, and to be set free to leave this physical world and go back up into the realm of Godhead. Okay, return to Godhead, go to the realm of spirit. Okay, that is the goal, is to leave this physical material world altogether. And it's interesting that you have this similar idea developing in India as well. And there definitely was connection between East and West, all right? You know, all the way back to Alexander the Great with the Greeks, you know, there's definitely a connection here, all right? So we have a variety of these Gnostic groups. And I'm trying to move this without, there we go. Oops, now I went too much. Okay. So, and I'm going to read, I just want to make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, good. All right. So salvation then here, as I already mentioned, is a matter of knowledge and awakening to your divine self, okay, that your divine nature, and transcending and overcoming this material world to return to Godhead, one's true home. Okay, and material existence is a form of alienation, a type of bondage that the spirit needs release from. And so the key thing here is in these Gnostic circles, okay, the various groups, they use magic as a way of shifting your sense of identity, of your awakening to your true self as divine. Magic is the tool, is what's used to bring about this state of enlightenment. That is what's distinctive here within basically Gnostic circles, okay? So let me just read to you some texts, and it's getting kind of dark here, and hopefully this works all right. Let me just go to the next slide just to see here. Yeah. Well, let me just finish this one and then go on another. So this then becomes known and is referred to as high magic in the Western tradition. High magic. Oh, why does it do that? High magic. And here we need to be aware there's a distinction being made. High magic versus low magic. High magic is when magic is used in order to attain a type of union with the divine, to become one with God, one with spirit, one with the source, right? And then therefore through that, a realization of your true self, your true nature as divine. Okay, that's high magic. Low magic refers to practical elements, practical ways of using magic in terms of for getting this worldly results. You know, if you have a sick child that you want to heal, you want your crops to really grow and bring in a great harvest, casting a love spell. You know, it's using magic for things that help you in this world for physical results, okay, material results. So it's this worldly in focus, okay? That's a key difference here. So high magic here now becomes a spiritual path. It's a type of spirituality that we will find in all kinds of little esoteric groups. And what I mean by esoteric, they are occult groups. There's going to be occult kind of teachings, movements, societies, and groups that have their roots here in all of this. And they're going to refer to this as the great work, is the spiritual path of using magic to attain enlightenment. Okay, this is the great work. And this is what you would undertake to actualize your true self, okay, to attain this type of enlightenment. And so this becomes, as I say here, the basis of occult spirituality, which is what the Western was officially called the Western esoteric tradition, right? This is what we're now getting into. Herein lies the roots of this. Okay, all right, hopefully this all makes sense. And so, along with the Gnosticism, these various groups happen because we have a lot going on here. We have in the midst of these Gnostic groups, and there's a diversity of them, we have a collection of teachings, a type of philosophy that's regularly referred to as, Hermetic philosophy or the Hermetic tradition. Okay. There's a collection of works that get written and composed at this time from the 2nd to 7th century, known as the Corpus Hermeticum. Okay, that's a Latin term, just basically a collection of books that espouse Hermetic philosophy, certain teachings. Now, why is it called Hermetic? Well, it was believed and it was promoted at this time that this philosophy, this occult secret teachings type of philosophy, has its roots going back to a mythological figure referred to as Hermes Trismegistus. And again, this is, legend and myth here, where Hermes is the name, all right, that the Greeks gave to a deity. Hermes is the messenger of the gods. And with that, Hermes actually is sort of the continuation of an Egyptian deity type of being known as Thoth. I think I have that on another slide. Do I have that written down? Thoth. Let me just see here. I thought that maybe I had it written down. I guess not. Okay. Thoth. And so Hermes is Thoth. Again, don't worry about this too much. Who is a personification of wisdom, all sciences, all secret knowledge, sort of like a godlike legendary figure. Okay, of as you see here, an Egyptian god of wisdom. And so Trismegistus means thrice greatest, the greatest priest, expert in terms of religion, greatest king, ruler, greatest philosopher. Right? That's sort of the idea here. This is all, again, very mythological, that once upon a time there was this being, and that this philosophy comes from above, comes from this higher source of this godlike being that has various names. Egyptian deity to the Greeks, a Greek kind of name for this deity, is very ancient and is a source of wisdom. So this is what it's claimed, is that this philosophy comes from a higher divine source, okay, that's very, very ancient, goes back to the Egyptians that the Greeks then inherited, all right? Okay, so one of the key books in this collection is the Emerald Tablet, and I just like to always put that in there, because later on when we watch the film The Secret, the very opening of that film, that became one of the most popular films in this century. I don't know what year it came out. I forget now, 2006 maybe or something. Millions and millions of people have watched it, and it's very influential and popular, along with books written with that title, The Secret. And the very opening of it is on the Emerald Tablet, this secret teaching that they're trying to hide because it was being opposed by the establishment. It's like they don't want you to know the secret to life and the secret to power. Okay, and that's sort of the idea behind The Secret. So anyways, it has its ties going right down here to the Emerald Tablet. So anyways, it teaches sort of Gnostic philosophy, Hermetic philosophy, alchemy, and magic. And I'll talk about alchemy here in a sec. And it gets very much popularized and revitalized in the Renaissance, as we'll see. But it's believed to have this ancient wisdom that comes from above. Okay. So what is this all about here? So let me have a sip of water. Well, let me first of all, before I talk about Hermeticism and that, let me just read some text from Gnosticism. And we have, in terms I mentioned, there were Christian Gnostic groups, And we have the Gnostic Gospels. They are largely later, after the New Testament and the Gospels that we have in the Bible. They actually have a later date for the most part. Most people hold to. More so, they're more in the 2nd century. But just to give you a bit of an idea here, is a key concept amongst the Gnostics from the Christian standpoint, say, is that, the idea of being born again. Where Jesus says that, for you to have eternal life, you must be born again. There'd be some kind of a spiritual birth, right? And so they kind of play with that. And so here, just to read a passage. People who say that they will first die and then be raised from the dead, because again, the resurrection is a key thing. The resurrection of Christ is central to Christian teaching and theology, right? Those who say that they will first die and then be resurrected are mistaken. If they don't first receive the resurrection while they're still alive here in this body, once they have died, they'll receive nothing. Okay. Meaning that you need to attain a resurrection, attain that eternal life now before you die. That's what the resurrection is actually all about, is attaining eternal life now before you die, not a literal physical resurrection of this body before Judgment Day. It's like, no, you attain eternal life now. You attain that divine destiny now before you die. Okay. Those who say that the Lord first died and then arose are mistaken, for he first arose and then he died. Right? Attained that spiritual resurrection to transcend physicality, to overcome physical limitations, to attain that eternal state. That is attained before the death. Right. So here you can kind of see the kind of how they work with death and resurrection in terms of the Gnostic perspective, how that gets kind of reinterpreted. Right. I just wanted to bring that in, just so you know that a little bit different. So anyways, to read to you here, again, some Gnostic and Hermetic tests to give you an idea. So just at that time period in the early church, because again, there were these Gnostic circles, all this was the time of Christianity being born as well, right? So just as in Christianity, they had decrees, not decrees, but creeds that they would say that in terms of what they would believe. So did the Gnostics, a creed, a statement of faith, what they would believe. And so here was a creed that was very common amongst the Gnostics. What makes us free is the gnosis, the knowledge of who we once were from above, spirit, of what we have become here on earth in our bodily form, of where we once were up there, of wherein we've been thrown down here into earth and physical existence, of where to we are hastening. Our goal is to get back up there to spirit, to the Godhead, okay? Of what we are being freed of this material existence, of what birth really is, and of what rebirth, being born again, really is. Okay. So again, the whole idea is that we once were God. We once were of spirit, of the divine, in the Godhead, but we've been cast down here to earth in this physical material existence, right? So that's where we once were, and we're now here. And our goal is to get back up there, to be set free from this material existence. So another passage. For the human being, though, is a godlike living thing, not comparable to any other living things here on earth, nor even to those who are in heaven, the gods. Because in fact, the human being is actually better than the gods. For none of the heavenly gods will go down to earth, leaving behind heaven. Yet the human being can rise up into heaven and also take in all of the heaven, and knows what's in it, its heights and depths. Okay, and he understands it all, and even greater than this, he comes to be on high, attaining the heavens without even leaving the earth behind. And so enormous is his range. In other words, a human being is greater than the gods, because a human being has the ability to encompass both earth, materiality, and the spiritual, the heavenly. Whereas the gods with a small g, okay, they're limited to the heavens. Their ability is restricted to the heavens. And so we encompass both heaven and earth, and so we're greater than the gods. Okay, that is the secret teaching of the Gnostics, right? In terms of human greatness. So anyway, so we can see here some things. Now, this is from a Hermetic text, and you can see that the thinking between the Gnostics and all the Hermetic philosophy is really overlap. So here's a passage from a Hermetic text, okay? And it goes like this. If you do not make yourself equal to God, you cannot apprehend God. For like can only be apprehended, understood, and known by that which it is like. Okay, so for you to know God, you have to be like God, right? Basically, okay? Therefore, outleap, go beyond this body, right? And expand yourself to unmeasured greatness. Outstrip, go beyond all time and become eternity. So then shall you apprehend God. Embrace in yourself all the sensations of all created things of this world. Like just take it in. It's attaining a type of cosmic consciousness, all right, is what they're calling for. Embrace in all things, like become fire, become water, that which is dry, that which is wet. Be simultaneously everywhere. Be everywhere all at once. Be on sea and in the land, in the sky. Be at once both not born and in the womb, but young and old, dead and beyond death. Right? Become all that is. And so if you can hold all these things together in your thought, in your consciousness, all times, all places, all substances, all qualities, all quantities, basically to expand yourself, to become the universe itself, then you shall know God. Okay? So basically, they're saying you need to acquire this type of cosmic consciousness. Okay? And it happens, right? It can be done. And that is what, you become all that is. Then you know God. Then you've attained that highest goal. You've attained that state of enlightenment, right? So that is the vision. That is the goal. That's sort of what's being taught here in terms of Hermetic, Gnostic type philosophy that really develops in this time period. And so this then becomes the spirituality associated with this esoteric tradition, the magical view really kind of blends into this, where this becomes a spirituality that gets associated with the use of magic in the Western tradition. Right? And as we'll see with the rise of Christianity, all right, that's going to be in the next slide, a lot of this stuff is going to go underground. A lot of it gets kind of lost, abandoned, forgotten, goes underground, and it's going to get revived in the Renaissance, right? This is what's going to happen here. Okay, so hopefully that all made some sense. And it's not easy stuff, right? But just to give you a bit of an idea. Now here, as you see here on the right, you've got the 7 Hermetic laws. Okay, that was put together in a book called the Kybalion by Atkinson in 1908 that claims to sum up the teachings of Hermetic, some key Hermetic principles. And I put on your list of videos to watch. A great little video that this guy who just is dealing with music, but really kind of nicely puts together how these interconnect with each other. So you can kind of see how it works. And again, a lot of complexity to all this. Let me just move my thing. Hopefully it does move out of the way for you all the time. Okay, whoops, what happened now? Oh, okay, hopefully you can still see this. All right, okay. I don't know how I got there, but hopefully I can get back to where I want to go. So the first key principle here is of just consciousness. All that is pure consciousness. The universe is mental, not in the sense of like insane, but just pure consciousness. Okay. Then the second principle is, as we've already seen, as above, so below. The principle of correspondence. There's a connectedness in the universe, a correlation and connectedness between the physical and the spiritual. Okay, they correspond and interconnect. Then the principle of vibration, right? If you watch some of those videos, and I think I showed a little bit of that icon in terms of vibrational frequency, that everything's all about vibrational frequency, okay? Everything's in constant vibration, All right, that's really the fundamental structure and nature of reality is vibrational frequency, i.e. energy. And then it works through polarity, of positive and negative, yin, yang, even like electrons, positive, negative. It's sort of like this duality of night, day, summer, winter, hot, cold, this, that, in Taoism, the yin and the yang image, right? It's like this dynamic, this world, that's how things work, is in this constant opposites. Okay, of dualities. And that then, of course, leads into gender of male and female, masculine, feminine, the giving, the pushing, and the receiving, different kinds of energetic forces, okay, of push and receive. Then that leads to rhythm and flow, and there's a constant rhythm and movement and cycles and seasons of things, and then causal interactions as a result, cause and effect. All right, as how everything is interconnected. So that this is basically the structure and dynamic within reality is what's summed up here in these 7 principles. Okay, again, heavy stuff. All this is just to introduce you to some of the key concepts here in the Western esoteric tradition. All right, so don't freak out about it all too much. It is a lot to all this. Okay, all right. But just so you have an idea as to what it's about. And then, as I had mentioned, alchemy is a part of this. And so alchemy gets developed. And what's interesting, if you have alchemy over in China as well, it happens east and west. It's always so fascinating in terms of the history of religion, the history of ideas, similar ideas, practices that show up in different parts of the world. But alchemy refers to the esoteric art of transmutation and change. And so chemistry comes from this. And so how this all begins, it goes back to the Egyptians, as it has Egyptian roots. They were really great at working with gold. I mean, look at all the tombs and whatnot. Everything was cased in gold, covered in gold, and they worked a lot with these metals. And so as they would separate the gold from base metals, they felt that since there was that close contact, remember how we talked about magic, that there's imitative magic and contagious type of magic? Well, because that lead or those base metals were embedded in the gold and they intermingled, and through a purification process, you pull the gold out of the base metals. But because they were entangled on an energetic frequency field, it should be possible to turn that lead, those base metals, into gold because they had that energetic link and connection. So again, it's fundamentally a magical principle at play here, that you should be able to turn that base metal into gold. Okay, hopefully you get me here, right? And that would be possible. So you get this then, that there's ways of turning lead into gold. And believe it or not, I've seen videos and I've talked to some people, and some pretty sharpy people, like PhDs in physics kind of stuff, who claim that's actually possible to do this, right? And there are videos, it's always in French, about modern day alchemists actually having some success in doing this sort of thing now. You need to evaluate, but I'm telling you, I've come across this stuff. And so that act of trying to turn lead into gold, and then the quest for the philosopher's stone, the Harry Potter stuff, right? They would bring all this wealth. That element of the material side of it, turning lead to gold, that then becomes a metaphor as well for a spiritual process in life of taking basically the crap of this world and the crap and suffering and negativity and pain and struggle of this material world and being a human being in the flesh in this world, transforming the lead, the base materials of material existence, and transforming it, raising it up into something higher, purifying it, transforming it into a higher level of this becomes the trials and difficulties and suffering of physical existence. This is the stuff we work with to attain enlightenment, to attain our God realization, to realize the true nature of the self. Right? We use the stuff of this world to bring about that transformation that we can attain this higher state of being. Okay, that's alchemy here. And so it's to transform the self by recovering and activating and cultivating whatever, this inner divine essence, all right? That is the journey. So alchemy then becomes a spiritual practice as well, of transforming stuff of our physical existence, right? And through that, we attain our divine nature. We can actualize it through this. That's what it's kind of meant to be about. Okay, so just so you know, we have these trends. They're very deep. You know, I really know very little about them. I'm just introducing you to some of these things that are important here. A lot of the texts, I mean, I already mentioned, you know, in the Greco-Roman period, so many books got destroyed. Later on, huge libraries have gotten destroyed, like in Alexandria and Egypt, and, you know, throughout history, it's just so much destruction. So there's a lot that we don't know in terms of what they all actually believed and practiced and did. There's been a huge loss of amazing wisdom and information throughout history. Okay. So, but anyways, I just want to introduce you to some of these things here. So as I already mentioned, we have the rise of Christianity in the first century, that at first is heavily persecuted. First by Jewish authorities and then by Roman authorities. Christians being put to death for their faith. It was illegal religion in the Roman Empire, but it still continued to grow and expand, eventually getting about 10% of the population. And then Emperor Constantine, who has this visionary experience. Again, when I do Christianity, I talk about it. But he has this visionary experience that leads to his conversion to Christianity, and he stops the persecution. And he gives Christianity a legal status in 313 and starts to support it. Okay, starts to support it. And anyway, then Christianity starts to get well established. And then later, after him, the next emperor there in 392 makes Christianity the official state religion of the Roman Empire. And so it becomes the Holy Roman Empire. Okay? And in that context, then paganism gets outlawed and becomes illegal. Okay, in terms of a lot of Roman practices, the worship of Roman deities becomes illegal, basically, and a lot of this goes underground. And so this whole magical esoteric tradition largely goes underground, forgotten, lost, abandoned, what have you. Not a whole lot going on for a few hundred years until we get into the 15th century, when it gets rediscovered and revived. Okay, so hopefully that is just a little bit on this section here that hopefully makes enough sense to you all. All right. Okay. I think that's it for this slide. Yes. And that's where we'll continue. And the next class session is the revival of the occult. Okay. All right. Ciao for now.